Step back, stand by for information regarding another wicked problem on our planet. The oligarch media, the commercial media seem to ignore it. Good morning, Ed Evans here, October 15th, 2022. I want to share a written comment on Facebook at Arctic News. And the commentator wrote about an article that appeared that shares information by a scientist in distress over nuclear waste explosions in Hanford, Washington State. This is important because there are nuclear waste sites around the world. If this particular waste site goes, it could contaminate a good part of the United States.
Today, as Hanford faces the daunting task of ridding the tanks of their toxic waste, an accident cannot be ruled out. Alexander also points out that the DOE is not equipped to manage this massive undertaking. One of the main problems at Hanford is that DOE is understaffed and overtasked, Alexander told me. As such, we cannot conduct in-depth reviews of each of the individual systems in the facilities. Therefore, there is a high likelihood that several systems will be found to be inoperable or not perform to expectations. If these systems don't perform, the risk of an immeasurable nuclear accident could ravage the Pacific Northwest, killing thousands, just as Mayak did in the Soviet Union. It's difficult to fathom what kind of turmoil a comparable explosion would inflict. The fallout, no doubt, would spread far and wide. During the massive fires of summer 2021, smoke from Oregon and California reached the East Coast, blanketing Chicago, New York City, and other cities in a dark, murky haze. It was much the same when Washington State's Mount St. Helens blew on March 27, 1980, volcanic ash spreading north to Canada and east across the United States. Air pollution monitors in northeastern United States cities detected fine ash particulates. I vividly recall my mother instructing my brothers and me to stay indoors in Billings, Montana, as our front yard was blanketed in gray soot as if a giant ashtray had been dumped on our lawn. This heavy ash devastated entire streams in Oregon and Washington, killing off salmon hatchlings. It laid waste to forests. Many of these rivers and wild areas have rebounded, but what if they'd been consumed in scalding atomic debris and not volcanic minerals? A Hanford tank eruption would no doubt create a similar crisis, but instead of ash, radioactive particles would fly across the region. The Columbia River, the lifeblood of more than 10,000 farmers and dozens of commercial fisheries in the Pacific Northwest, would certainly be contaminated. These industries, much like the agricultural communities around Mayak in the 1950s, would be unlikely to survive such a horrific event. Then there's the toll on people. Depending on wind patterns, an atomic plume would immediately impact millions of residents across multiple states. Places like Walla Walla, Washington, and Boise, Idaho, would be forever changed. Even if they weren't immediately impacted, no family would choose to raise a family in a city that boasted high levels of radioactivity. Towns close to Hanford, like Richland, would be forced to evacuate, becoming ghost towns overnight. The entire economy of the Pacific Northwest would be crushed, in turn triggering a market crash that would spread across the globe. Aside from the economic turmoil, a radioactively charged explosion would be unlike anything the United States has ever experienced, and it would create environmental challenges far greater than the fall of the Twin Towers on September 11, the accident at 3 Mile Island, or the Deepwater Horizon oil spill combined. People would die. Ecosystems would be devastated. The environment, especially the Pacific Northwest, would be forever altered. It's a dire but entirely realistic scenario that nobody wants to see unfold. Nuclear warning, a scientist in distress.